Hi there, welcome to the YouTube channel. I'm glad you've come back to yet see another deck tech featuring a card from the Commander Master set that's upcoming as I record this video. Today's one is nothing fancy. I'm going to be honest about it. You can't really do much fancy with this card because there's only one way to go with it, and it's probably the most straightforward, and it's a real good beginner's deck. I have to say that. If you've got someone who wants to start playing Magic and wants to play Commander, I think this is probably the easiest deck they could play from the ones I've created recently. And of course, I'm talking about Azusa, Lost But Seeking. 2 in a green for a 1/2 human monk. Whatever. But you may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. It is probably that straightforward, and it is that straightforward from my point of view. It's a card that just lends itself to one technique, and that's to ramp out your mana as fast as well, your lands out as quickly as possible, and then just cast big things and smack people in the head with them. So that's what the deck does. We've got I'll go through the lands because it's mainly forest, as you can imagine, but we've got Blighted Woodland to go and get a couple of basics, the Hideout, the Courtyard, and further down we've got the other land from the Streets of New Capenna, where you go and search out for a forest and gain a life. Evolving Wilds does that trick for us as well, along with Terramorphic Expanse and Riveteer's Outlook. Myriad Landscape, when it becomes untapped, we can pay the 2 and go and find 2 basic lands that share a land type, put them onto the battlefield tap, so that gives us another way of getting 2 forests into play. I've chucked in Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, just so we can make sure that, maybe that we need to tap the Terramorphic Expanse for mana instead of sacking it. That's why it's here. And obviously Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx is here, because at the end of the day we're playing a big green deck and we want to get as much devotion out as we can. Hence I've gone very low on the artifact ramp side of it. Now I am playing Jeweled Lotus. You can take this out and replace it with something else, but I'm playing Jeweled Lotus because the turn 1 Azusa, Lost But Seeking off a Jeweled Lotus, 3 lands and then maybe another creature is a real good starting point. And even later on in the game, having that extra 3 mana to cast Azusa if it's been killed off is really helpful. Other ramp is only Sol Ring and Arcane Signet. That's all we're playing. There's no point in going too heavy on it. You just want it simple, and this is simple. We have got a couple of cards in here you can replace, one of which is Exploration. It's another way of just playing extra lands. We've got Jahidi Offshoot, so when we play a land we gain a life, and there's a lot of landfall creatures coming up, so that might be the only complicated bit, but they do something. You play a land, the card does something. It should be straightforward as a beginner's deck. Scythe Leopard just gets +1/+1, and Traverse the Overworld. Go and find a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then if you've got 4 more card types in your graveyard somehow, go and search your library for a creature or a land card, reveal it, then put that in your hand. Late game it's very good. Early game gets you the land, late game gets you a creature you might need, so play with it. Azusa's Many Journeys lets you play an extra land on the first turn it comes into play. Druid Circle gives you a life when you play a land, and then if you get up to level 2 you can always play 2 lands a turn. Kalani Heart Expedition, get the landfall triggers, go and find a couple of basics when you sacrifice it. Lotus Cobra gives you an extra mana for each land as you play it, as you know. Rampant Growth searches out land. Roaring Earth, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to put some +1/+1 counters around, or you can channel it away. Sylvan Shrine goes and gets us a basic land. I mean, you can play 3 visits if you want to. There are other cards that do the same thing, so it's whatever you've got. Vined Lasher Kadusu is just a nice way of getting a big creature with all the lands we'll be dropping. And Howling Mine means we're always drawing those extra cards, so we get those extra lands with a bit of luck. Architect of the Untamed gives us energy, and once we get up to the 8 energy level we get a 6/6 beast artifact creature token, which is quite nice. Cultivate goes and gets us a couple of lands. Dryad of the Elysian Grove always just lets us play an additional land. Turning our lands into every basic type is irrelevant because we're only going to be using green mana in this whole deck, but it's another extra land drop each turn. Grazing Gladeheart gives us a couple of life when we play a land. It's not the best creature in the world. You can drop this and play something else if you want to. Retreat to Kadusu gives us 2 life or +1/+1 counter on a creature. It's always worth chucking +1/+1 counters on Azusa, by the way, just to try and get it out of the burn range. Get to about 6 and you're safe from most things, just so we're clear. Rites of Flourishing, extra card draw, extra land drop. Scoot Swarm. Now, I've got to be honest, Scoot Swarm sometimes causes MTGO to crash. So if you're playing on MTGO, be careful with the amount of tokens you're creating. If you're playing in real life, knock yourself out, have fun with it. Tyler's Provisioner gives us a food or a treasure. Tyler's Tracker gives us a clue, and we can sack the clue to draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on the tracker. Wayward Sawtooth gives us an extra land. Once we hit the Ceci Blessings, it can be a fairly good attacker for 5/5 for 3 mana if we're there already when we play it. Bow and Nylea gives all our attacking creatures Death Touch, and it does combo kind of another card we've got in here. But it also has a nice ability of putting 4 of the target cards from our graveyard on the bottom of our library. I haven't played Elixir of Immortality, I've ignored it for this deck, but this gives me that opportunity to recycle some of my cards if things get killed off. Calls for a Crew Fix, can always play lands off the top of our library, that's nice. With all the extra land drops we might be able to hit quite a few. Undergrowth Champion, if damage would be dealt to it, while it has a +1/+1 counter on it, remove it and prevent that damage, remove a +1/+1 counter. And landfall means you just get to put more +1/+1 counters on the Undergrowth Champion. Works very nicely. Horn Agreed, whenever a player plays a land, that player draws a card. It's another way of you drawing extra cards to keep things going. It's very nice. Circuitous Root and Explosive Vegetation do the same thing in this deck. Go and get a couple of forests for us. We haven't got any gates in here, so there's no point in playing them, so just go and get forests. Dudeen Rangers. Whenever the land enters the battlefield under your control, if you don't control a ring bearer, the ring tempts you. It's a nice way, especially if you can get your ring bearer killed off somehow and you get to do it again. You get to get tempted by the ring again, so on and so forth. Does help a little bit. Nothing major. Again, it's a card you can take out and put something else in if you prefer. Nylea, God of the Hunt, is where I'm talking about the combo with the Bow and Nylea. Because Nylea gives you trample, and this gives you Death Touch with your attacking creatures, it does mean that you can quite happily attack with your creatures. They may block it with something bigger, but you can assign 1 point to them, that creature, and all the rest of the damage from that creature to them. Okay, just bear that in mind, because you only need to deal 1 lethal damage because of the Death Touch. So it's a nice little combo. Plus the fact this lets you use some of that mana you'll have sitting around to pump it up and make that creature bigger and probably survive the combat anyway. Oracle Muldai is another way of just playing additional lands and playing lands from the top of our library. Conduit of our Worlds, if we do have any of our lands taken out, or we've done the Broker's Courtyard or Evolving Wilds, etc., we can replay them, get the landfall triggers again, and carry on doing it. Garrick Wildspeaker just untaps some lands, and at the end of the day, getting this up to 4 loyalty to do the whole overrun part of the game is really good, and just another little mini win condition. Stone Cedar Hierophant, it lets us do whenever a land enters the battlefield, you untap the Stone Seer, and you can basically get a little bit of mana on the go if you've got a few lands coming into play. Untap something, tap it. So tap a land, let's get it right. Tap a land, untap it with the Stone Cedar, play a land, Stone Cedar untaps, you've got 1 mana floating. Just keep it going. A little bit of a tricky, people get to learn the mana pool that way and how mana floats. Font of Mythos gives us more cards to draw, so more land drops that we'll hopefully be hitting. Nyx Lotus does the whole devotion thing, a bit like the Shrine to Nyx does, but just in artifact form instead of landfall. Going over to 5 drops. Embodiment of Insight turns some of our lands into 3/3 creatures with haste, which is nice and gives all our land creatures vigilance, so get some attackers. Elder Gargaroth doesn't really do anything, but it's just one of the big creatures, doesn't have any landfall triggers as such, but we can do the whole draw a card when we attack or block. Greensleeves Marrow Sorcerer gives us a 3/3 badger creature every time a land comes into play, and his power and toughness are equal to the number of lands we control. Hero's Bane is something to sink our mana into once we get there, especially with Nylea in play. The Hydras get quite big quite quickly. Likewise, Iron Scale Hydra, if a creature would deal combat damage to Iron Scale Hydra, prevent that damage and put a +1/+1 counter on it, so it's a really good blocker. Primal Command, just another way of maybe getting some shuffling our library or shuffling our graveyard into our library, searching for a creature card, put it in our hand, gaining some life, bouncing something if we need to. Shamanic Revelation, card draw, life gain. Spore Mine just gives a whole load of saplings when we hit the landfall trigger. 5 mana for 3/3 is not great though, so bear that in mind, but it does give us a lot of blockers if we need them. Vorinclex makes an appearance because he searches out 2 lands when he comes into play, and then we can transform him for 8 mana and get the whole of the Grand Evolution on the go, which makes life so much more fun and upsetting for your opponent. A bit like having Ren and 7 appear and having a really big tree folk for -3. I would automatically start with a -3 just so we're clear on this. Zendikar's Royal, 5 mana enchantment. When a land enters play, we get a 2/2 elemental. Bootlegger's Stash makes turns all our lands into treasure token producers, which is quite good fun. Primeval Bounty gives us creatures if we cast creature spells. +1/+1 counters for all the non-creature spells, or extra life for every land that comes into play. Ancient Green Ward lets us play lands from our graveyard as well, and it does a kind of Panharmonicon thing, especially for lands. If a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. So all your landfall triggers go off twice. Hydra Broodmaster does the whole monstrous thing, gets a whole load of tokens. And remember, you can do this at instant speed, so it's always worth saving your mana and then having a big board to attack with on the next turn. Hydra Omnivore deals combat damage for opponent. It deals that much damage to each other opponent. With Trample, this gets dangerous quickly. Oran Reef Hydra, you get to put a whole load of +1/+1 counters on it because everything coming to play is a forest. Rampaging Balos. There's 2 of the most traditional landfall creatures. Rampaging Balos and Avenger of Zendikar are both here. They both have fantastic landfall triggers. You always want to play them in a landfall deck. Overworld Hydra. Power and toughness equal number of lands we control. It has reach, which people forget. And when it comes into the battlefield, you get to go and find a land card and put it into the battlefield tapped. This is a great way of getting your Shrine to Nykthos in play if you haven't got it. Bear that in mind. Avenger, I've already mentioned, is one of the great landfall creatures. Nyx Bloom Ancient just makes our mana tap for silly amounts so we can cast all our big stuff. Apex Devastator. Cascade, 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 Cascade. Yep, okay, then we'll just hit all some of our good stuff, a bit of luck. Ulamog. Yep, comes into play, destroy target permanent, it's indestructible, Annihilator, and if it does get milled away or put in your graveyard somehow, you get to shuffle your graveyard back into your library along with Ulamog. And finally, because I love it in a green deck, Genesis Wave's here. And if there was a deck that Genesis Wave was going to excel in, it's this one with the amount of land we'll be getting. But that's it. This is why I think Azusa is a really good entry-level commander card. Yes, you can play anything you want. Yes, I've got some expensive cards in here. You know, Ulamog's here, Apex Devastator's here, Nyx Bloom Ancient's here. I know they're expensive, but you can take them out and put other big green creatures in, whatever takes your fancy. But it's just a nice, easy commander to start commander with if you're trying to teach someone how to play the game. But that's it for today. I really hope you've enjoyed this slightly shorter than normal video. Please, if you haven't subscribed before, please hit the subscribe button. As I'm recording this before Commander Masters is released, I'm up to 220 followers here on YouTube, so if you can help me out and hit that button, I'd really appreciate it. And there's a bonus video coming out tomorrow, but I'll leave that for tomorrow. But thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you soon on my stream. Don't forget, I'm on holiday at the moment. No streams this week, next week. Back on 13th of August for more streaming fun and games. You can come and see me play some of these decks I'm talking about. Okay, thanks for watching. Take care. See you soon. Bye.